under Lección Cuatro. The subjunctive is a concept that is not going to go away this year. So like I said, it's very important that you pay attention and you take notes. I recommend splitting your screen between this video and your notes page because the video will go hand in hand with your notes. So here we go, the present subjunctive. This video is going to talk about two different things. First, it's going to talk about what the subjunctive is, and then we will talk about how you form the subjunctive in Spanish. The next video that you will watch will talk about how you actually write a sentence using the subjunctive because there are a couple rules that you have to follow with that are different than other sentence structures we've talked about in the past. So here we go. Like I said, present subjunctive. What is it? First off, the subjunctive is not a tense. It is a mood in Spanish. Everything that you have learned so far, every verb conjugation, you've learned tenses essentially. And all of these tenses belong to a certain mood in Spanish. There are 3 of them. And the easiest way I can think to explain this is to picture an umbrella. The umbrella is your overlying mood, and all the tenses fall underneath that umbrella. So, the 3 tenses in Spanish are the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The indicative is the basically present tense, the preterite, and the imperfect. So back in Spanish 1, when your teacher taught you the present tense, what they were really teaching you was the present indicative. Last year, when you learned the preterite, you were really learning the preterite indicative. When you learn the imperfect, it's actually the imperfect indicative. When we say indicative, this mood expresses things that the speaker believes to be certain and true. Okay, it definitely happened. It is certain. The next mood we're going to talk about is the imperative. Some of you may have heard of the imperative before, but the imperative, those are your commands. Okay, things that are imperative or necessary to be done. So those would be affirmative negative to commands, affirmative negative usted commands, affirmative negative ustedes commands. And lastly, we have the subjunctive. The subjunctive is used to express hypothetical situations, doubt, disbelief, and denial. And it's important to note that within the subjunctive, you have a bunch of different tenses. We're going to focus first on the present subjunctive. So in this video, you may hear me just say the subjunctive. What I'm referring to is the present subjunctive. There are other tenses of the subjunctive that we will talk about later this year, but for now, it is just the present subjunctive, or in Spanish, se dice el presente del subjuntivo. So again, there are 3 moods in Spanish: the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The subjunctive is used to express hypothetical situations or things that the speaker finds to be doubtful, they're in denial about, they don't believe it. So that takes care of our first question of what is the subjunctive. Let's talk a little bit more about how the subjunctive is formed. So now we get into the actual conjugations of the subjunctive. I think it's easiest just to show you and then explain as we go. So I'm going to take bailar, just a boring old AR verb. First thing I'm going to do, put it into the present indicative, which is bailo, also known as the tense you learned in Spanish 1, bailo. Then I'm going to drop this O and attach the opposite ending. So I get baile, bailes, baile, bailemos, and bailen. So that is how you form the present subjunctive with AR verbs. Go to the present indicative yo form, drop the O, add the opposite endings. Same concept applies for ERs and IRs. So like if we have comer y vivir, that would be como, vivo, drop the O, add your opposite endings. So coma, viva, comas, vivas, coma, viva, comamos, vivan, coman, vivan. So again, to form the present subjunctive, step 1, go to the present indicative yo form. Step 2, drop the O. Step 3, add opposite ending. Now this should be kind of ringing little bells in your head. Some alarms should be going off. What else is formed like this? We just talked about it. What else is formed like this? Ha! Usted and ustedes commands. Usted, ustedes commands are formed like the present subjunctive. Okay? Follow that same concept of the present indicative yo form, drop the O, add the opposite ending. So think about it. If you've got a verb like poner, we go to the present indicative yo form, pongo, drop our O, and just like when we formed commands, we're going to maintain that change. So we get ponga, pongas, ponga, pongamos, pongan. Okay? And then last thing for this part of your notes, this section of your notes, we have to talk about Kargar Sars, our good buddies Kar, Gar, and Sar. Just like in command land, when we have Kargar Sars and we want to put them into the present subjunctive, we have to include that Kargar Sar change from the preterite yo form. So, for example, you'll notice that I didn't actually put an ending after the spelling change, and that's because the spelling change is going to happen in every single form of the verb. Not just the yo form, not just usted and ustedes, but everywhere. For example, pagar, which means to pay, will become pague, pagues, pague, paguemos, pagan. That spelling change, which I'm underlining, happens everywhere, and then you just attach the subjunctive ending based on the subject you're working with. Same applies for car verbs, same applies for gar with zar verbs, except obviously you're going to use the car change and the zar change with those verbs. So that takes care of regular verbs. Again, to reiterate, we go to the present indicative yo form, drop the O, add the opposite ending, maintaining any irregularities that yo form may have. Next thing we have to talk about, stem changing verbs and the subjunctive. Bum, bum, bum. So stem changing verbs and the subjunctive get weird, okay? With AR and ER stem changers. And again, this is just something that's easier to show you and explain as we go. AR and ER stem changers are good. They're not weird. They're totally normal. If you have a verb like resolver, okay, its yo form is resuelvo. Drop the O, add your opposite endings to form the subjunctive. Resuelva, resuelvas, resuelva, resolvamos, resuelvan. So the reason that I said AR, ER stem changers are good is because they follow a normal stem changing pattern. The stem change is going to happen in the boot, okay? The nosotros form has no stem change because it's not part of the boot. IR verbs are where the subjunctive gets kind of weird. And again, it's just easier to show you and explain as I go. So if we take a verb IR stem changer like divertir, which means to have fun, watch what happens to its conjugations. Yo form divierta, diviertas, divierta, diviertamos, diviertan. What's going on up here in nosotros? There is a stem change happening in the nosotros form, but it is not the same E to IE stem change that's happening everywhere else in the verb. This stem change, E to I, is similar to what we see with the suela verb in the preterite. Let's look at another IR stem changer, like dormir, which is an O to UE. So when we put it to the subjunctive, duerma, duermas, duerma, duermamos, and duerman. Again, we're following our normal stem changing pattern in the boot, but the nosotros form of the verb is getting a stem change. But not just any stem change. The nosotros form of the verb is getting a suela stem change. So when we have IR stem changing verbs in the present subjunctive, we have to include that suela change that happened in the preterite for these verbs in the nosotros form only. Okay? Suela verb, IR stem changing verbs have a suela change in the nosotros form, and that is what makes IR stem changers weird in the subjunctive. One last type of verb that we need to talk about in terms of conjugating into the subjunctive, and that would be irregular verbs, because it's Spanish. There's always irregular verbs. There are 6 of them, and you guys actually already know them because they're the same as the irregular usted and ustedes commands. So we get dar, which is de, des, de, demos, den, ir, vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, and vayan. Ser, sea, seas, sea, seamos, sean. Aber, which we did not talk about when we talked about commands. Aber just has one conjugation, just like the present indicative, where it's I, the preterite indicative, which is ubo, the imperfect indicative, which is había. In the present subjunctive, it is haya, and that means there is or there are. Continuing on with our irregulars. Estar, which is este, estés, este, estemos, estén. Don't forget the accents everywhere but nosotros. And lastly, saber. Sepa, sepas, sepa, sepamos, sepan. And there you have it, our 6 irregular subjunctive, present subjunctive verbs, also known as dishes. So when you're conjugating verbs into the present subjunctive, don't forget to do your dishes. Dar, ir, ser, haber, estar, saber. Those are your 6 irregulars. So to recap, to conjugate a verb into the present subjunctive, first thing we're going to do, go to the yo form of the present indicative, drop the O, add your opposite ending. We can't forget about karga sar changes. What happens with stem changers? Or about our dishes, the irregulars. Again, these conjugate just like formal usted and ustedes commands. The only difference being with pronouns. When you have the subjunctive, you never attach a pronoun to the end. It always goes before your conjugated verb. So with reflexive verbs, that pronoun would go before your conjugation as opposed to being attached at the end with an accent. Do not attach pronouns to the end of your subjunctive conjugations. They go before. So now what you guys are going to do, you are going to complete 2 activities on the supersite called completar and inténtalo. So you'll complete those. They both just practice present subjunctive conjugations. And then you will return to the page called in-class assignment, and you will watch the second page of the second video, which will explain how you use the subjunctive in a sentence or how you write a sentence using the subjunctive. But for now, log into the supersite, complete completar and inténtalo, and then go watch that second video.